All right, family, it is conference time.
It's that
You've been
time.
emailing us and asking us, when are you guys opening registration? And registration is now open.
Right now.
Culture Proof Conference 2025 is now currently accepting your registration. And they're coming in. Like, I'm so super excited to see
Yes.
multiple generations of families just registering for the conference. The theme this year is Worthy of It All.
We have some great speakers, as always, that will minister to the entire family. And
Yes.
so I'm really excited about the breakout sessions.
Oh my
That was
goodness.
something that we were able to do this past conference, and it was a hit, man. It was
Yes.
great. It was great. And we have some things planned for this year. And so
Yes.
go to cultureproof.net and you'll be able to see the lineup of speakers. You'll be able to see breakout sessions, different things, details about this year's
That's
conference.
right. The theme revolves around the fact that Jesus is worthy to be exalted, that
Yes.
Jesus is worthy, that he should go public through us in every aspect, every area of our lives. And so, to that end, we are leaving no stone unturned
That's
as
right.
we talk about what is happening in the culture and how we can best reflect that Jesus is worthy of it all. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence. We're going to
Mm.
be talking about what's happening in geopolitics. Like, what does this mean for the
Yes.
return of Christ? We're going to be talking about purity. What about fall after fall of
Mm.
pastors in our churches today? What in the world is going on? Or as we
Yes.
like to ask, what
What
in
in
the
the
church
church?
is going on? So we're going to talk about, how do we engage? How do we equip our kids to stand? How do
Yes.
we live faithful lives for the glory of God in 21st century America?
Mm.
We've got 10 keynotes, 6 breakouts to choose from, 2 lunch and learns where you've got to register for that early because space is
Yes.
limited,
Yes.
especially if you want to choose your lunch options. You've got to check that out. We don't want to waste your time. We want you to be
Not at
blessed
all.
and we want you to leave equipped.
And as always, a highlight is our children's track. We
That's
have the
right.
culture proof kids and teens, and your children will be ministered to. And so it's just going to be a great time for the family.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. It's always a great time to gather with the family of God, to be equipped and to be encouraged. If you've got any questions, you can get those answered by going to cultureproof.net. That's cultureproof.net. Culture Proof 2025 happens June 19th through the 21st. We're in
Mhm.
the same location. That's Faith Baptist Church in Bartlett, Tennessee.
Yes.
And early bird registration is underway right now. You've
Right
got until
now.
February 28th to get that early bird registration in. You don't want to miss it. You're going to get last year's conference pricing if
Mm.
you register right now.
Right now.
Hopefully, we will see you in just a few short months.
Every single stronghold, we pull them down. Yeah.
Thanks for checking out Culture Proof. I'm Miki.
And I'm Will.
And today we are going to be having a conversation about life and where we are in this country, what we see almost sort of on the horizon that would point to ways that we can improve as we, I don't want to say message because it sounds very mechanical, but as we talk about the sanctity of human life, have we kind of, jumped a hurdle? Have we cleared a hurdle in how we think about life? I know as we were looking back on this election that we just had, there would be some people who would say, whoa, I think we dodged a bullet as far as where our ethics and our morality is, just because this was supposed to be the election of abortion, right? Like this was supposed to be what the American people actually want. And that was going to be determined by who would have a seat in the White House. So does that mean that we don't want abortion? We're going to have a conversation about that. Joining us to talk about that. Well, before we do that,
Yeah.
let me say a huge thank you to our premier sponsor, BJU Press Homeschool. They make it possible for us to have conversations like this, where we get to talk about the issues and not apologize for having a biblical worldview. Not only do we appreciate them for sponsoring this podcast, but we appreciate them for equipping us to educate and train our kids at home. We have a biblical worldview. We want to disciple and train our kids. And so we want to spend a lot of time with them doing that. BJU Press Homeschool comes alongside us, and they make it possible for us to do that without the fear of having our biblical worldview attacked, even in our schooling or our educational curriculum. So we encourage you to check them out. They are our friends over at bjupresshomeschool.com. When you go /culture-proof, don't forget the hyphen. It's wonky to say, but I cannot tell you where you'll go if you don't use the hyphen. Okay. So it's bjupresshomeschool.com/cultureproof with a hyphen. All right. When you do that, that's your way of letting them know that the Addisons sent you. All right, let's have a conversation about life and where we are. Maybe some things that we can rejoice over and some things that we still need to mourn over. Joining us today to have this conversation is Caitlin Connors, who is the Southern Regional Director for the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America organization. And Caitlin, as we were looking at the election of 2024, my goodness, I was so concerned when I read some of the information that came out ahead of the election that abortion was the issue. You listen to the conversations happening among Democrats and even some of the conversations happening among Christians, and it seemed, well, we've kind of turned a corner and it's going to be what it's going to be. And people are kind of like rabidly pro-death in this country. And then Donald Trump won the election. When you guys as an organization look at the results of this election, what does it tell you about where this country is, or even maybe where this country is going?
Yeah, well, thank you all so much for having me and having this conversation. I think it's incredibly important to just kind of unpack everything from the election, especially on this topic, because you're right. Abortion is the issue that especially women, right? All women care about this issue, and that's what's going to bring them to the polls. It's going to determine this election, the abortion issue. And I think what we saw is that it didn't. In ways it did, but maybe not for the reasons that the pro-abortion lobby thought that it would, right? So we have a lot of states who had different ballot measures up. Every state went to vote. Obviously, we have a lot of different things we could look at to try to analyze a little bit. Okay, what role did the abortion issue play in this election? And I do think it played a very bold one. This was our first presidential election post the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe versus Wade. And since that happened, the radical kind of pro-abortion wing has been essentially lying to women, trying to confuse women about what these pro-life laws in about 25 states across the country now. So about half of our country, if we could just put that in perspective, has a law on the books that's protecting life at some point in pregnancy, right? Going from conception to North Carolina has a 12-week law on the books. So about half, when you talk about being divided, right, you even have about half of the country who, in terms of the states, who have decided to protect life, and then another half who aren't doing that, whether they have razor thin margins in their legislatures and half of them are trying to get it done, the other half are trying to defeat it. But it's a very divided down the middle kind of issue. And I think what happened in this election is that the abortion campaign really threw everything that they had, trying to target women, young women, suburban women in particular, and saying, if you vote for Donald Trump or if you vote for pro-life candidates, your rights are being taken away. And I think, while some people believe that, I think a lot of Americans are waking up a little bit and saying, wait a minute, Roe versus Wade was overturned 2 years ago. I live in a state with a pro-life law, and my rights haven't been taken away. I'm still receiving the same health care I received before. So we now have 2+ years of living in this world that the abortion lobby would tell us would strip all of our rights away. It was a doomsday situation they're describing, and we've lived in it for 2 years. And I think a lot of people are saying, well, wait a minute, the sky did not fall. Maybe what you're saying is not true. And so we're seeing, I think, in a lot of cultural topics, we see pendulums swing back and forth. And I think the abortion side of this issue, the pro-abortion side of this issue, has pushed and pushed and pushed to be more radical on the issue, to lie and fear monger. And I think a lot of voters are saying, okay, I just am not totally buying what you're selling. So I'm optimistic. I think we have a ton of work to do. Like I said, we still have 25 states plus, depending on court cases, that are not protecting life. We have a federal government who doesn't have, a policy to protect life, and meanwhile, you have the abortion lobby once again trying to federally enshrine abortion into our Constitution. So we have a lot of work to do, but I think there's a lot of silver linings for this election.
About that, I want to take a break and talk about our friends over at We Heart Nutrition. We are well in the daily routine, the daily habit of taking our supplements, and I got to tell you, I love it. I feel so much better about life just knowing that I'm doing something for my body that is changing the way my body responds. We've also been working out. We've also been watching how we eat. So this is a part of our health is our new aesthetic. Right? This is the thing that we're doing to feel good. If you are, let me just say, we are what would be considered middle age, and boy, that just came out of nowhere. Okay, one day we were young in 20s, and then the next day we were middle aged with teenage kids, and probably they should be older. Probably we should have grandkids. I don't know. And things start creaking and popping. I got to tell you, you got to do the right thing for your body. You got to steward your body well. And since you've got to do those things, why not do that with a company that is as invested in the things of God as you are, so that you are not funding those things that go against your firmly held biblical conviction? That's our friends over at We Heart Nutrition. They offer the highest quality supplements on the market. They're all third-party tested for purity and potency. And while taking these supplements, you can expect better sleep, better recovery, better hair, better life, less popping and creaking and cracking.
Well,
At least that's what I'm holding on to.
Yeah.
So check out our friends over at We Heart Nutrition and use that promo code CultureProof. You can save 20% when you do that. That's weheartnutrition.com, weheartnutrition.com. Use the promo code CultureProof and save 20% off. Do something good for your body. God has entrusted your body to you, and the call is that we would steward it well. weheartnutrition.com. Use the promo code CultureProof and save 20% today. But I'm curious to kind of go back and just analyze the way we thought about the data that was out ahead of the election. I think so many pro-life Christians were looking at the information. We would be included in that, and we're going, oh man, it grieves me to think that we could be in a time where we have never had abortion be the type of top shelf issue. This is the issue that everybody is I want to talk about that. I want to have a conversation around that. Do you think that we, even on the conservative side, almost kind of took a type of bait from those who are trying to push abortion as one of those, super important issues that everyone's got to be thinking about, everyone's got to be talking about? I mean, because when you look at the data that came out, you said this is the first election cycle that we've had abortion be one of those main issues that voters were voting on. I mean, we talked about that. Then you get past the election and it leaves you wondering, wait, was it really one of those issues? Because, I mean, if we didn't elect Kamala Harris, are we saying, no, we are not voting for women to continue on with the confusion and the delusion that they can just be unpregnant? How do we analyze the way we filtered the information ahead of the election?
Yeah. Well, I mean, poll after poll showed that abortion was always in the top 3 issues, right?
Yeah.
Of what voters were going to the polls to vote on. And that, when you see that raw number, you think, oh gosh, that means because they want to vote in favor of abortion, right? And I do think in that polling, when you see high numbers of abortions, my most important issue, a lot of times that demographic is younger women, suburban women who are saying, the lines that I already said from the other side: my rights are being taken away.
Mm-hmm.
I have to go vote and fight back against this. And then on election day, we actually saw Donald Trump with much better numbers for suburban women and younger voters. And it was kind of a head scratcher. Wait, I thought, they were all going to be coming in droves to the polls because of this abortion issue, and thinking that only the Democrat Party is with them on this issue. And apparently it's the issue they care the most about. So I think in this election in particular, we did have a lot of issues at hand, right? But people are struggling financially. The economy certainly a determining factor for a lot of people's votes, crime, immigration. I mean, all kinds of issues that people
Hmm.
go to the ballot box to vote on. But you're right. The polling kept saying the abortion issue, the abortion issue, the abortion issue. And I think, we have a demographic, I guess you could say, but a sect in the country where that is. I mean, the abortion issue, it is what they live and breathe, and they are going to be marching in Washington. It doesn't matter what else is going on in the world. It seems like if abortion rights aren't, abortion throughout pregnancy, taxpayer funded, stripping parental rights away, if that's not what they get to vote for, then they're not interested. We've seen this radicalization of this issue where, I know you've probably heard of the Bill Clinton days, right, of safe, legal, and rare.
Mm.
We've come to such a departure of that, where literally we are hearing the other side say abortion should be legal throughout pregnancy. And while they're telling you that's what they believe should be legal, they're also telling you, but late term abortion doesn't happen, that you're lying when you say that that happens, which is, it's always been, hard for me to grapple. So they're saying, let's make it legal throughout pregnancy, but also late term abortion doesn't happen. And when you say that, you're just trying to scare people. Late term abortion does happen, and it's egregious and it's horrific. But they would campaign for abortion throughout pregnancy, taxpayer funded, forcing doctors, nurses, medical professionals to participate in this, even if with their objections, stripping away parental rights. That was a big part of the argument for some of our ballot states where there were constitutional amendments up on their ballot, taking away parental rights. So you have a minor who needs her parents' permission to get a tattoo, but not to go get an abortion.
Wow.
Right? I mean, I think a lot of people, even if they say nominally, oh, I'm pro-choice, women should get to make choices about their own bodies, that sort of thing. I think, what you see when these things play out, when they get more and more egregious and radical on this issue, you have your just kind of average everyday people who maybe aren't really thinking about the abortion issue with too much intention and thinking, wait, I'm a parent. Absolutely not does my daughter go to an abortion clinic without me knowing. And that's the kind of thing that they're pushing for. So I think, again, we had this situation where maybe it is an issue that matters to a lot of people. It is an issue that matters to a lot of people. But I think we had a better strategy as pro-life movement this election to really expose the extreme nature of what they're pushing for. It might sound like this nice little package of women's rights and bodily autonomy and between a woman and her doctor. Let's let the government just stay out of this. They try to package it like that to sound so reasonable. And you dissect it a little bit and you see, wait, abortion in the third trimester? I don't think so. Or my minor daughter going without my permission, or my tax dollars going to pay for this? No. I can't get on board with any of those things, even if I think I'm pro-choice, right? And so I think we've had a bit of an awakening. We've had a lot of exposure to their extreme nature on this issue. And so while a lot of people would say in polling, oh, abortion is a very important issue to me, I like to think that the messaging, we saw TV ad after TV ad, we saw incredible leadership out of people like Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida.
Yeah.
He campaigned against that amendment like it was his own campaign for governor. I mean, he was up and down that state. He was talking to constituents. He was saying, look, you can say you're pro-choice, but I know that the majority of Floridians are not with us on this and that this amendment would deliver. It's leadership like that. It is, again, not to say messaging, it's overused, but it is the way we speak to voters, the way we educate voters, and don't let the other side claim this entire narrative of what they say that they're advocating for. It's not what they're advocating for.
Yeah, they are masters at deception, which kind of cloaks their sinister motives in language that would cause, I think, the majority of those who are uninformed to believe that they care about women or that they care about their constituents. And so I think it's good that pro-lifers would continue to loudly tell the truth. I think it's uncomfortable, and we can have a conversation around that in just a minute, but I know you wanted to.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, working at a pro-life organization, how do you analyze, because we talked about leading up to the election, but we know that after the election, there was a boom in people going and seeking abortion pills and stuff, like they wanted to stockpile these different contraceptives and all this kind of stuff. So how do you guys, because the fight isn't over, how do you guys analyze that? Because it seems like even though the majority voted for President Trump, they still desire abortion. And so how do you guys analyze that?
Yeah, and you're right. That's where we say the work is nowhere near done, right? We have a victory from this last November in that we have majorities and we have a White House who believe in life, but that does not check the box completely, right? We have a cultural fight on our hands. I have a colleague who said this, and I just thought, wow, that's exactly it. For the last 50 years of Roe versus Wade, now I know we're 2 years past Roe, but for that 50 years from 1973, the pro-life side was running a legal and policy campaign. How do we claw back at Roe versus Wade? How do we let pro-life policies come into play? How do we save those lives? Really, this kind of triage mode for pro-lifers. And the pro-abortion side was running a marketing campaign for 50 years. And they've become a household name, Planned Parenthoods of the world. They're just here to help women or low-income women, college students. They're only here for what their tagline is, care no matter what. Well, we know from their own reporting that 99% of their business is abortion. They're not there to give annual medical checkups to women. They're, go show up at a Planned Parenthood as a woman who is pregnant and wants to choose life. And she says, gosh, I really need help with getting diapers or maternity clothes or whatever, and see what a Planned Parenthood has to say to her, right? She is out the door as soon as she walked in because they have nothing to offer her. They have abortion to offer her. So as a movement, we have got to do several things, but in particular, we have got to focus on the needs of moms and families and babies. We have, again, for a long time been in this triage mode of how do we just save these lives? I mean, every day, thousands of babies are being aborted. And even with laws in place now, those numbers have dipped depending on the state. But you're right. We see this increase in abortion pills where you can order them online. They come to your house. We shouldn't forget, but besides this incredibly dangerous nature of that, where you get online, you're terrified, you're pregnant, you don't know what to do. I Google abortion pills. They come to my door. I don't really know where they came from, somewhere, maybe from China or India, somewhere. And by the time they actually get to my house, maybe I'm several more weeks along, the complication rate goes up. Nobody's there with me to take these pills. There's no medical oversight. We have an abortion campaign, a pro-abortion group in this country who insists that they only care about the health of women, and it's these pro-lifers who just keep getting in the way of that. And yet they advocate for women taking pills they found online, and all the risks that come with that, hemorrhaging, obviously the loss of life of the baby, but in some cases, the loss of her life or bodily damage to her or future fertility problems. And in the name of bodily autonomy, they're for that. So we have to continue to expose them for their agenda, that this is a profit industry for them. And whether they can sell the pills or whether they can sell surgical abortion, whether they can somehow finagle your tax dollars, whatever it is to increase the bottom line, they're happy to do it. And so, for us, the work has to continue. We have to show this compassion of the pro-life movement, which has always existed, but now we have this unique opportunity. We are in many states able to save lives. We can work towards that goal in other states and in Washington to change hearts and minds in this country. And that starts with the exposure of the extreme nature of the other side on this. It also is with showing, hey, we are not, the other side has labeled us forever and always as we're only pro-birth. We only care about these babies until they're born, and then we're on to the next thing. Anyone who has gotten to know, worked with, been inside a pregnancy care center, for example, knows that's not true. These women, often volunteers working at pregnancy care centers, are there with this woman, walking with her in her time of need. There's financial assistance, there's clothing, material support, here's how you get on your feet. Here, we're going to help you write a resume, so that when you're settled post-baby, getting employment, getting yourself in a stable position, right? All of those things, fatherhood classes that these pregnancy centers provide, so that dad is part of the picture too, because we know that having the family intact is the best recipe for success. We have to show this has been part of the movement all along,
Right.
has been walking with these moms in their time of need. And now we have a responsibility, obligation to not just continue to do that work, but to show people we are doing this work and amplify it.
Yeah.
We're saving lives in so many states across the country, but guess what? Less abortion means more babies.
Yeah.
That's a great thing. But also, what are we doing to make sure we are creating a culture of life?
Yeah.
Not just protecting life from abortion, creating a culture of life.
Yeah, I want to get to that. I actually want to go back to the idea of the misinformation, the disinformation, just the outright lies that I think are available to women. There's a hysteria that we saw just ahead of the election, and then I think immediately in the wake of the election, I'm going to lose the right to this, I'm going to lose the right to that. And so I think when you look at, again, the messaging that's coming from those who do not care about women or their children, I think the most success is in the lies, and it's in the deception. And so I want to talk about that. But before we do, I want to take a break just really quickly to thank another one of our sponsors. We were talking about getting online and searching for abortion pills and not having information. Wouldn't it be great that if that happened in your home, you would know what was going on in your home? That's why we want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Accountable to You. The question then becomes, what's a Christian to do when we are saturated? We live in a culture where there are so many messages. We are inundated by those messages coming in our home through all of our devices. And sometimes for us as parents, us as spouses, and even those who are administrators at churches, we have no idea what people around us are searching for online. We have no idea what they're looking at. And these things usually pop up and like slap us in the face later. We can avoid that. We want to tell you about Accountable to You. Using a smartphone or a computer opens the door to a host of digital temptations in a world saturated with pornography and other harmful content. What is a Christian to do? We need to take a proactive approach, welcoming transparency on all of our digital choices and devices. And Accountable to You makes that easy. Their accountability software provides detailed activity reports for all of your family's devices in real time. With accountability in place, your family can guard against temptations online and live with purity and integrity. You can learn more and try it for free at accountable2you.com/cultureproof. That's accountable, the number 2, YOU, accountable2you.com/cultureproof. All right, Caitlin, getting back to our conversation, we talk about the outright lies. And I think one big one, and again, I never want to push our guests to have a conversation that they are not prepared to have. So I will follow your lead on this if you want to pivot away from the way I set this question up, but it is a question that I care about. There was a lot of information surrounding in vitro fertilization, and how are women going to be able to plan their families and all of that. And so I think that this was the issue that confused a lot of pro-lifers, right? So there was this kind of like, wait a minute, no, I don't want babies to be murdered, but we're having this conversation about growing families. Isn't that a good thing? And you saw a lot of deception surrounding that. And I think that because there's not a lot of education around the fertility industry, and people don't know that there often is the loss, just the reckless loss of human life, even in that industry, there needs to be an informed conversation around that, not just fear mongering in one direction or the other. So I'm wondering how your organization is going to undertake maybe even an education campaign in that area, so that we're kind of shoring up all sides of the discussion when we are talking about being pro-life in this country.
Yeah, man, the IVF, the fertility industry, that conversation, that's a whole episode too, right?
Sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, there is a lot to discuss with that. Susan B. Anthony has a C3 research arm, Charlotte Lozier Institute. They've actually put out some really great information on IVF, just an explainer. Hey, this is what it is. This is the process. No opinion on it, but this is just for everyone's awareness. This is the IVF process. And I think it has to start there. A lot of people, if they've thought about IVF, it is in the context of, people have fertility issues, families are good, we want people to be able to have children. This is a way for people to build their families, and that's a nice thought. And while we have many beautiful people in this world because of IVF, that doesn't mean that there aren't things to consider about an industry, any industry. So, I'm here in Alabama. Everything kind of blew up on this topic because of Alabama, and our Supreme Court here. It was kind of unexpected that the case was going to get its ruling on the IVF issue. And then of course, cue the fear mongering, right? It was, here in Alabama, we have a constitution that says life is protected from conception. And so then the question of, what are embryos, right? Those are babies. They are. And in Alabama, we recognize them as people. And so the court case here was pretty cut and dry. I mean, people give our justices a hard time and saying, oh, you're just biased pro-lifers. Well, they had a law to look at. They had a constitution to look at. And they said, y'all, the voters said in Alabama, babies are babies at conception and embryos are created at conception. So, it was kind of a no-brainer for our judges, and I'll just give them a shout out there because I know that they've been highly criticized, and they had a very clear law in front of them to interpret. And then since then, the conversation has been, oh my gosh, look what the pro-lifers are doing now. See, we told you this whole time it wasn't enough for them to take abortion away. Now they're going to take away IVF, and then they're going to take away your birth control, and just really riling everybody up. And when you have, a population who, we are going about our daily lives. We have not delved into the conversation, the topic of IVF, but you're hearing the headline, okay, pro-lifers now think IVF is bad and we're going to take that away from you. That sticks in people's mind. They say, okay, well, that's just too much for me, because IVF is family building. I always found it kind of ironic in this argument that we have a pro-abortion lobby who's saying like, oh, families are good and they're trying to take families away from you now, building your family. I said, don't you have an entire industry on breaking families apart? But,
come on.
Okay. If you can look yourself in the mirror after saying that, that's really something. But so for me, that was the irony of that was tough. We have examples from other countries, many European countries, who have looked at this issue and really put a lot of ethical considerations around it in terms of how many embryos are created, not allowing embryos to be created to then be destroyed. not creating embryos for the sake of sending them off to be researched.
Come on.
Yeah, there's a lot to this
Look,
that we
Caitlin,
gotta, yes.
let me just jump in and say
Yeah.
that's really the conversation that I want to see happen
Mhm.
on a national and on a local level. I think that so many of these issues are because of a lack of education. There's a lack of information,
Yeah.
and the person or the people
Mm-hmm.
who seem to speak the loudest are the ones who have the lies, right? And so they're the ones who have a vested interest in the confusion. So they're not trying to, and I think on the pro-life side, what we have tried to do is we have tried to, and I'm not at all suggesting that we need to move away from this. But I think because we have tried to be careful and accurate, we have been slow to show up and give the information. Those who are, proliferating the lies, those who don't care, those who are reckless, I mean, they're yelling and you're getting their messaging. And I think to the point that you just made, how do you have an industry that, I mean, that is what you do. You are for the taking of life. And now all of a sudden you are creating this conflict in the pro-lifer. And that's the thing that concerns me, Caitlin, that it's a conflict that is being created in the pro-lifer that I think where we were approaching a cut and dry life is sacred.
Yeah.
We are made in the image of God. And so now you've got those who were decided on that point and they're like, yes, I'm with you. But now there's a new dissonance that has been introduced that is like, wait a minute, but don't we want to build families? Don't we
Right.
want a stronger country with families that we can? And so now, because of that messaging, and I think that we really need an education, and campaign may seem a little bit disconnected, but I think that there needs to be an effort made there that people would understand how to talk about that issue, how to be both pro-life in all of the ways that are important when you're talking about IVF, but also to be sensitive to women and sensitive to families who are wanting to build their families. I think we get too intimidated too quickly. And so we just back off and then we allow for the liars to overtake the
I
conversation.
was just gonna say, it seems like it's all about also understanding personhood, like
Yes.
understanding, because that's where the root is. If you can do these things and
good.
freeze these embryos and do all this stuff, you don't understand that that's a person
Made in the image of God.
made in the image of God. And so I think, when that connection is there, then it's like, okay, no, we can't do this because
Yeah.
we are discarding
Yeah.
humans,
Yeah.
and I think that understanding is not there in a lot of instances.
And again, I would say that goes back to education. I'll
Yeah.
just punt it over to you, Caitlin, your thoughts on, I guess, where we go in 2025, how we begin to have maybe a conversation that folds in a new aspect. And maybe it's a conversation that pro-lifers didn't think we'd be forced to talk about. But I think, again, because you've got the other side that is invested in the disinformation, we have to be able to have this conversation.
Yeah. Well, the enemy thrives when sowing confusion. So I
Yes.
think you're very right to that point where pro-lifers are pretty much united on issues, and then IVF kind of came out of not in terms of it being a practice, but in terms of it being something for us to debate, kind of came out of nowhere around this February of this year, and so yeah, so I do. There's a ton of education to be had. There are ethical considerations for IVF. There are ways to do it, and we've seen other countries who have really, taken the lens and said, okay, what do we need to be concerned about? We are preserving life, we're protecting life. So how do we view this process within that lens? I think most of us, I know personally, even within my own family, there's an IVF story, right? And so it is very personal.
Yeah.
And your heart just goes out for families who are struggling with fertility.
Yes.
It is a heartbreaking thing. And so we do immediately, I think, to your point, get intimidated because we say, I don't want them to think that I'm judging them, because we're
Right.
not.
Right.
I'm not judging you. I'm not saying that you've made bad choices or any of that. Bringing life into this world is a beautiful thing. It is a gift from God. How do we respect it? How do we treat it the way that God intended for us to do so? When you have an industry that goes unchecked, I don't care. It doesn't have to be life related, we're talking about that here. Any industry that goes unchecked is
Mhm.
dangerous.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that what they're doing is ethical.
Right.
From a woman's health perspective, right? There we go again. We care about women's health. Well, the story here in Alabama was unfortunately a story where a family's frozen embryos were destroyed
Mm-hmm.
because another patient came in and knocked over the cabinet and destroyed them. And so they have rights in that situation as parents, and those embryos should have rights as well, in terms of, being, especially, in Alabama, again, the law is very clear, but they should have rights. So from just a perspective of patients' rights, we should not have an industry that goes unchecked, and anything that they do is fine, because we just don't want to get into that conversation because it's heavy and it's complicated.
Yeah.
We don't have the luxury of not having the conversation. So there is a lot of conversation going out there. There is a lot of education out there. I really would encourage listeners to check out Charlotte Lozier Institute, CLI.org. They have a lot of information on IVF, but on all the range of life issues. We talked about abortion drugs earlier. There's a ton on there about that. Just abortion by state. So you can look up your state and see kind of what is the current status of how many abortions happen in my state. Are they from abortion pills? Are they from surgical abortions? Are women coming out of state? There's a wealth of information from CLI. So I would encourage your listeners to go over there. And I think, you hit on another point that is confusion from the other side that really fuels all of this. And another egregious lie that we saw throughout this campaign in 2024 was that pro-life laws make it illegal for doctors to perform life-saving care on women.
Right.
That is not just a lie, but
Right.
it is so dangerous.
Yeah.
Where you have women who have said, well, in my state, I shouldn't go to the doctor if this is happening because they're going to tell me to go home, or maybe I'll even get in trouble. You have women who have been made to believe if they're having a miscarriage, that they're violating the law. And when we have gotten to that point where we have a side who seemingly has endless amounts of money for TV and radio and, digital targeting ads, and forget the fact they're also getting our taxpayer dollars over here. And you have young women believing that, and they think, okay, well, instead of going to the doctor, I'll just see what happens. Or you have doctors who somehow are either genuinely confused about the law because they've been lied to, or, I hate to say, but are playing politics themselves.
Yeah.
And women deserve better than that. There is not a single pro-life law in this country that says women should not receive life-saving medical care. If a woman goes to the doctor and she presents with complications through her pregnancy, she is to be treated for them. The lie that the other side continues to feed us is that if she has a pregnancy complication, the only solution is abortion.
Yeah.
Well, most OBs, that's like way down on their list of what they would do to render care to her.
Right.
There's a lot of things in between that they would do. And by the way, these women want to have their babies. They're not seeking abortions in most of these cases. So we see these stories out of Georgia and Florida, and there's some from Texas, across the country. It's also hard not to be cynical that in an election cycle, all these stories seem to be happening in swing states, right?
Right.
Or where we have a really contentious Senate race or something like that. In each of these cases, these women have a malpractice suit on their hands. And that's where the focus should be. Hey, they were denied medical care when they should have been. And this law had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Now, I know the ProPublica outlet loves nothing more than to than to try to underscore that pro-life laws are dangerous to women. That is a bread and butter issue for them. So if they can ever find something that sort of fits the narrative, they'll try. Mainstream media as well.
Right.
And it's disheartening because it's not true, but because we also see women who are believing it. And that is, it's just beyond dangerous. It's reckless. And again, it's coming from an industry who has told us for 50 plus years that all they care about is women's health. And they're lying
Right. No,
to
point
us,
blank. Point blank. I
just
mean,
from all angles.
yeah, no disclaimers. I mean, they're just lies. In fact, and let me just direct our listeners. You can go back. We had an October 23rd episode of the podcast. It was Lies That Kill. And actually, Dr. Ingrid Skop was on with us to talk about those lies and to talk about the type of information that is killing women. And that's not being hyperbolic. I mean, it's just a fact, right? Like if you don't have information, you don't know what services are actually available to you, life-saving services, and you've got a side that has no problem telling you that, hey, they're not going to try to save your life, so it's better just die at home. Just stay at home. You're having issues. It's I don't know, wicked. Maybe people overuse that word, but I think there is something very demonic about just encouraging women to devalue not only the life of their unborn children, but their lives as well. Let me ask you this, Caitlin, because I am aware that for this election cycle, you know, you've got 10 states that had abortion measures on the ballot. And you've got 3 states that kind of protect life, right? But you've got 7 that don't. And I'm just probably oversimplifying that. What's the difference? What made the difference in those 3 states where voters turned out to vote in favor of protecting life versus the 7 where they didn't?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And we put a lot of focus onto these ballot measures because that's been the new era, right? We're post-Dobbs, so states are passing laws to protect life. And so the other side is, okay, what can we do to keep that from happening? Let's throw up a constitutional amendment where in some cases a simple majority can change a constitution. That's another conversation. But so yes, we had 3 success stories. In the 7 states where we saw losses, I think it's important also to look at the states themselves and kind of the makeup of them in terms of Democrat versus Republican. You know, we have states like Maryland, who unfortunately are very, very liberal on this issue. And really, there wasn't a campaign I mean, yes, there were pro-lifers and there are solid, dear pro-lifers in these states who are doing everything they can to combat this. But in terms of the dollars, in terms of just the voter rolls that exist, it was an incredible uphill battle in some of these states. When you look at states that are more competitive electorally, like Arizona, who did lose, you look at, and let's compare Arizona to Florida, two swing states. You look at the leadership in those states. And I bragged on Governor DeSantis earlier in this call, and it just bears repeating. He went to all corners of that state, up and down, and he campaigned against Amendment 4 because he knew it was dangerous for the state. He knew, obviously, he has his pro-life convictions, and he is very pro-life. He signed the heartbeat law in Florida. But he knew that the state would fundamentally change if we allowed this abortion measure to pass. If we said, in Florida, you have a constitutional right to abortion, you look just geographically in Florida, and all the states that surround it are all very solidly pro-life states who have laws that are either protecting life at heartbeat or conception. That would make Florida ripe grounds for abortion tourism, bringing in people into the state just for the sake of getting abortions. You know, he also knew that parental rights are incredibly important to voters, obviously in Florida, but across the country. We saw an entire movement on parental rights going back to 2023 and 21 in terms of the education issue, right? Where we were seeing some of the, we were being exposed as parents to some of the stuff going on in classrooms that COVID allowed us to see, because then our kids' classrooms were in our living rooms and our dining rooms. And we thought, wait, what is this? And parents had this sort of awakening, right? And this parental rights piece of this conversation was really underscored. And so Governor DeSantis knew, okay, Floridians are not for this. They are not for this taxpayer-funded abortion movement. When you look at the other states who've gone previously, who were right after the Dobbs decision came down, and we were at kind of mass hysteria in terms of the other side's narrative of the sky is falling. And there wasn't time for people to realize, no, it's not. We had some ballot measures like in Michigan on the ballot. And you have groups like ACLU who have subsequently come and challenged every sort of pro-life adjacent law on the books in Michigan, including saying, well, if it's a constitutional right to have an abortion, then it's also a taxpayer's obligation to help fund it. That's where they are in Michigan. So we've seen the playbook from the pro-abortion side, give an inch, take a mile kind of situation.
Yeah.
And so Governor DeSantis was able to say very clearly, hey, we do not want this in Florida. And then you have Arizona, a swing state, definitely some solid pro-life leaders, but you have a governor who's pro-abortion, who is saying, that you should support the amendment that bodily autonomy, women's rights, all of the like poll tested marketing phrases. Because again, they're running a marketing campaign. They're not running a fact-based campaign. They're not running a policy campaign. They're running a marketing campaign, and it's successful in a lot of ways. That's how we take in information, right? I mean, how do we have products sold to us?
Right.
Good marketing campaigns. And the abortion industry has really learned that and has excelled in it, unfortunately. And so having leadership is key, because especially from the pro-life perspective, we do not have mainstream media that give us the benefit of the doubt. We don't have, we have some good outlets. We have people like you, thank God, who are getting the truth out there. But you turn on, your legacy media, you look at the Washington Post, you look at New York Times, these kinds of outlets, they don't report accurately on the life issue, and they always give the benefit to the pro-abortion side. And so as a pro-life campaign, we can scream and holler and say, what you printed the other day, that's not true. Or you didn't give me my full quote where I said this, and that, which has actually made the point.
Right.
And then, you're giving all this airtime to their side, et cetera, et cetera. When a governor speaks, they have to report it. It's usually live streamed. It's up there for everybody to hear. They have a literal stage that is listened to, even if reporters will add their color on, well, we think this was wrong because da-da-da. He still got his words out. He still was able to get this message out. Likewise, when we have pro-abortion governors who are also spewing these lies. So having that leadership is key, and having it early on and having it consistently is really a requirement. I think we now know, having 3 success stories, in each of those cases, having clear, bold leadership was a recipe for success. So I think for states moving forward, we're going to continue to see these ballot measures. I think for states moving forward, it's very clear. Who do you have in your state? Who are the leaders in your state? They must speak. They don't have the luxury to sit this one out, and we have to demand it.
Want to take a minute just to say thanks to Forever Written for sponsoring this podcast. We have beautiful pieces displayed in our home that we absolutely love. Do you have a personal verse that you would like to have up on your wall? Do you have a family mission that you've not yet gotten framed? You need to check out our friends at Forever Written. It is beautiful, beautiful works of art that you get to personalize, and you get to take your decor, take your home aesthetic, and take those verses that are so powerful. The word of God is so powerful. It should be displayed prominently in our homes. Forever Written is going to help you do that. It's timeless truth, beautifully displayed. Visit our friends today at foreverwritten.com. That's forever-written.com. So let me just ask you this, Caitlin, before we wrap up our time together. When you look at America post Roe under Donald Trump, uh, what do you think, or what is Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, sort of poised to do as far as engaging Americans on the issue of life? Is there a place that we need to land as we have these conversations? Is it education? Is it compassion? Is it boldness? Like, where do Americans need to be in 2025 if we're going to be effective in the fight to protect life?
Yeah. Well, you hit a lot of good points, and I think that those are true. I'm hopeful. You know, President Trump in his first term did so much for the life issue, and obviously we've talked about the reversal of Roe. That was a biggie, obviously. But there were so many other things along the way that he and his administration did for the protection of life that we hadn't seen in previous administrations. And so I'm hopeful going into the second administration as well. I think we cannot shy away from this issue.
Mhm.
There is a sentiment that if we don't talk about it, then it can't burn us, right? That maybe this issue doesn't poll so well amongst this demographic or that demographic, so we're not going to talk about it. That's a recipe for disaster. We cannot have this ostrich strategy, right, where we bury our head in the sand. We have to be bold about this. We have to say, this is where we are on this issue. We're about protecting life. We're about serving moms and making this country, making our state, making this country a bastion for life. We are creating a culture of life. This is a holistic approach.
Mhm.
We want to be pro-family, pro-baby. How do we make, and really all of our policies feed into that. If we're talking about economic policy or education policy, that's a larger conversation, but all of those things feed into how we make a culture of life in our country. We can't, as obviously a movement, but for those who we support for office, can't say that, hey, that one just doesn't poll so well, so we're not going to talk about it. Voters need to hear.
Right.
Right. Because if you're not willing to talk about it, I promise you, the other side already is. And they're already telling voters who you are and what you believe. And if you don't have a
100%,
response, the only thing they hear is what the pro-abortion industry has to say.
That's right. We got to show up. That's always been the requirement. We've got to show up and to be faithful. We're going to continue saying that Jesus is worthy, that we would represent him well, that we would live for the glory of God. And that's in everything that we message on. So, we here, Culture Proof, we're going to continue talking about the issue of life, and we are unafraid to go into the areas that people don't want to talk about, because in that vacuum, in that space where people are like, well, I've got a cousin who did this, and so I don't want to address that because then that's going to listen, Jesus is worthy, that we would just tell the truth. And if you have a biblical worldview, then you are going to have a consistent message no matter how the culture shifts. And that is what we are about. We are about resisting those cultural trends that rival the truth of God's word. And so appreciate your organization, appreciate what you guys are doing. Maybe as we spot check throughout the year, we'll have to reach out to you guys and have you come back and help us have informed conversations on the issues so that we can truly live for the glory of God and represent him well in our country. Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank y'all. This is such an important conversation. I'm so honored that y'all would have us come talk, and thank you for the message you get out.
Thank you so much. When we resist those cultural trends that rival the truth, we remain culture proof. Until next time, Lord willing.
God bless.